What's going on, Mayhem people? So this week I want to show you some unique ways to use a band hanging from a pull-up rack to touch some corners and positions of your spine that may be deficient in your programming. So much of modern strength and conditioning really does ask us to create a stiff spine so we can effectively transfer power and energy. That's great. Now remember, ideally we're training for something. We're going out and catching a football, or we're throwing something, or we're mountain biking, or we're engaged in another sport that asks us to rotate and flex and move. What ends up happening, I think, when we take the natural conversation of modern strength and conditioning, very formal movement training without sport or without play or dance or something in there, what ends up happening is we definitely see people move towards stiffer and stiffer bodies, which are difficult and to sort of be able to problem solve in a creative way. Now, I'm not saying we need to be hypermobile yogis at all, but I'm saying that it's useful to keep an eye on these things. And there's a lot of ways to do this. Throwing medicine balls is a way of playing around with the different sort of shapes. Swinging a mace can be useful. Using the rope movement of someone like David Weck can be useful. And the idea is, hey, am I side bending in my motion? Am I getting these complex movements in? Originally, with a lot of the single kettlebell work or dumbbell work we did, we are getting some of these movements, combined motions of the spine and exposure of the spine. Oftentimes, though, if it's just barbell, front squat, deadlift, etc., man, we can be stiff and not see sort of the full potentiation of the movement language of the spine. So here's a couple ideas for you. One is just grab double overhand on something like this. And what this does is it allows you to get some twisting in a slightly different position. So now I'm in a flexed position, right? I can actually flex my spine and extend my spine. And that can feel good, and you can find corners of your lats that you may not find, or even your QL on the back, just hanging out in this position and sort of playing with these different shapes. Suddenly, if you just throw the leg behind you, you are now doing this crazy cosmic side bend where I'm rotating and opening up. And these are actually positions that would be very difficult to hang out in or access. So again, all I'm doing is just being overhead, getting into sort of a different side lunge, a little bit of side bending and opening, and you can find some sort of unique aspects of your fascia and connective tissue that you may not have otherwise. If you suddenly do the same thing with single arm and short lever, so now I stick my hand through, just capture the elbow, suddenly this allows me to get into some funny shapes as well, where I can rotate around and be kind of hanging out in some of these sort of combination shapes. One of my favorite things that we came up with is that most of the time we're on the ground doing some kind of, hip opener. People love to rotate these different directions, right? But one of the things we see is that a lot of our modern athletes are pretty stiff. And if you just grab a band overhead and then move from the top, you might find that you can hit some of these positions that require a lot of interesting and complex movement of the spine, tie it into either the hip being extension, or I can do the same side or the opposite side of the leg, but suddenly I have some of these kind of yoga-like things which really do make sense, but may not be that accessible to those of us who are a little stiffer than the average bear. So the idea here with today is to just show you that with a little bit of creativity, you can get a lot of interesting exposure to the complexity and sophistication of your spine in a really controlled way. Just make sure you're breathing in those positions, and what you might find is that you have more novel movement solutions and you even feel better, and that's the game. See you next week.